Hey, Matt, I'm curious. While you were at Puma, it looks like you were there, in the heart of Bolt era. I mean, February. It looks on looking at your LinkedIn, it says February 2008, and that's just right on the cusp of the Beijing Olympics when I think Bolt became a true cultural icon. And I'm curious to know, what was it like to be a part of a brand that all of a sudden really had a completely different momentum to it. And what was it like to be part of that momentum? And then what are some of the learnings you took from that you're now pulling into your new role?
Super lucky for me. I mean, if my LinkedIn says February '08, that's probably right. But I thought it was like the end of '07. But regardless, literally within a few weeks of starting that job, I flew to Jamaica. I met Usain as well as some other athletes and coaches that Puma was working with. And I basically, one of the first projects I started doing was documenting Usain's training and lifestyle the way I had done with Chasing Kimbia and Chasing Tradition. And so, we were, following him around and hanging out at the track and all of those things. And, I've feel so fortunate. I feel like, it's going to take 20 years for me to really look back on that time and think how lucky it was, where in February of 2008, Usain was basically an underachieving Jamaican sprinter. He was not well known. He had not yet reached his potential and actually had some, people thought he was lazy, didn't want to train hard. And really Coach Mills, his coach, is the one who sort of was able to motivate him and transform him. And so, when I started working with him, he wasn't a world record holder or an Olympic medalist. He was just a super talented guy who hadn't yet reached his potential. And so I still remember I think it was still called the Diamond League, but when he broke the world record in the 100 at Icon Stadium in New York, I was there with my video camera. If you actually look at some of the footage, I was like at the finish line, just past it with my little handheld camera. And he broke the world record and nobody expected it. Certainly Usain and Coach Mills and his training partners knew he was super fit, but the goal was still the 200. And so that kind of caught the track world off guard. Didn't make really, major headlines outside of track and field. But then, Beijing happens a couple months later and, pretty much overnight becomes, in a global celebrity and an icon. So, I just feel super lucky and fortunate to have, basically had a front row seat to that rise. And then post Beijing, we traveled all over the world. And the next year in Berlin at the World Championships, he breaks the world records again in the 100 and 200. And, so yeah, it was a wild ride and very, very fortunate to have had a front row seat to that.
I mean, yeah, the timing is amazing, right? I mean, that's like, especially for, I forget what your age would have been at that time, but a young guy, you're still a young guy, look great, by the way. But a young guy that, falls into this role with this guy that really transcends track and field, right? And he is now on the list of probably the top 5 to top 10 names in sport globally. And how did that, after Beijing, how did things change for Puma, right? And what your day-to-day looked like after that, kind of media storm hit?
To be honest, it was a little challenging because, track and field is part of Puma's legacy for sure. But at that time, it wasn't a priority. And so, Puma as a brand has swung the pendulum of lifestyle and sport quite a bit and, is swinging back again to performance side and doing some amazing things. But at the time, even post New York, pre-Beijing, there were only like 2 or 3 of us in the organization that were like, please listen to us. This guy has so much charisma. He can be a star. We think he's going to win in Beijing, and it was just really hard to get people to see what was coming. And then, post Beijing, these bigger companies can take a long time to react. And so it was certainly amazing, and Puma did a great job of, figuring out how to move him to the forefront of the brand's communication. We were much more around motorsports and football, soccer, at that time. And Usain slowly moved into sort of, the key brand communications, TV commercials and those things. But it was a struggle, and it took some time. And, if you know anything about product creation, in August of 2008, when he won in Beijing, the product team was already done with August of 2009. It's such a long lead time in terms of footwear and apparel. And so it did take a while to, get things going, but eventually they did. And yeah, it was obviously changed from Usain couldn't really go anywhere after that and not get, mobbed on the streets in really any city except maybe in the US. Track and field is much bigger in Europe, and so going to some of the Diamond League meets over there and doing appearances at our stores over there were kind of crazy. And in the US it was, but it's just not the same, or it wasn't at that time.
And it seems like for you guys, you're working for Puma, you're Bolt's, an athlete under Puma, but it's almost like you're managing 2 brands in a way, right? There's Puma, and arguably to some, Bolt in some ways is maybe the bigger brand. Yeah. And how did you guys manage that, and kind of what did you learn about managing that kind of athlete within a brand?
Yeah, it's very challenging in the sense that, the predominantly running shoes and apparel are bought by distance runners. And then you had, the greatest sprinter of all time. And so we struggled. I struggled. I wasn't in a position there that I was making, the big decisions. But certainly I also was struggling with trying to figure out how to translate Bolt to, product and storytelling that would resonate with distance runners buying, performance running shoes. And so there were some like fits and starts there. And ultimately, what we did and the way we thought about it is he really is a global icon for sport lifestyle. He was, one of the most charismatic athletes in that era. And so you lean a little bit heavier into just general health and fitness as well as the lifestyle side, and let your sort of, mom and pop running store. It was hard to make that connection. And so we just sort of had to maneuver a little bit with how we thought about him as an asset in running.